Now we'll start with our technical session number 9 on traditional and non-traditional security debates. I would like to invite Chair Professor Dr. Nagalakshmi M. Raman, Director and Head, Amity Institute of International Studies, Amity University, Uttar Pradesh. Co-Chair Dr. Chandra Bhanu Bharas, Assistant Professor, Gautam Buddha University, Greater Noida, Uttar Pradesh, and our resource person, Renuka Shyam Narayan ma'am, Research Analyst, Kota Heart and Research Center, Rajasthan. I welcome everyone on the dais. Thank you.
Please go ahead. So we have got the title as traditional and non-traditional security debates. Okay. So what is your title? This is under this theme.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin, I'd like to briefly introduce myself. My name is Akib Abid Mullah, and I am a research assistant at Interdisciplinary Institute of Human Security and Global Governance, IHSG. In my role, I focus on exploring the intersection of education, security, and governance. And I'm honored to be present today on a topic that is of great importance both nationally and globally. Before diving into the presentation, I would like to take a moment to express my respect and gratitude to the esteemed panel who are leading this session on traditional and non-traditional security debates. Firstly, I extend my heartfelt respect to Professor Dr. Nagalakshmi M. Raman, Director and Head, Amity Institute of International Studies, Amity University, Uttar Pradesh, who is serving as the chair of this session. I would like to acknowledge Dr. Chandrabhanu Bharas, Assistant Professor at Gautam Buddha University, Greater Noida, Uttar Pradesh, who is serving as the co-chair. Furthermore, we are privileged to have Mrs. Renuka Shyam Narayan, Research Analyst at Kota Heart and Research Center, Rajasthan, as our resource person. Mrs. Narayan will be delivering insights on the right to privacy and surveillance in India and analyzing the implication of surveillance policies on individual freedoms and security. I deeply appreciate the contribution to this session and look forward to the enriching discussions ahead. Now moving on to my presentation on India's education dilemma, navigating challenges, security and global competitiveness. The Indian education system is vast and complex, serving over 1.4 billion people. While progress has been made, it continues to face challenges in delivering quality and equitable and inclusive education. The National Education Policy 2020 represents a significant reform, but how far can it address the underlying issues? In this presentation, I will discuss the current scenario of education in India, identify key challenges and analyze the relationship between education and both traditional and non-traditional security concerns. Current scenario of Indian education system. India's education system is marked by a duality. On one hand, we have top-tier private institutions that rival global counterparts. On the other hand, many government schools and colleges still struggle with basic infrastructure. Education remains unevenly distributed across socio-economic classes, with marginalized communities continuing to face significant barriers. While literacy rates are improving, the quality of education, skill development, and employability remains in question. Despite these challenges, the NEP 2020 has laid out ambitious reforms aimed at making education more holistic, flexible, and multidisciplinary. NEP 2020, Idea and Implementation. The National Education Policy 2020 aims to revolutionize India's education landscape by making it more student-centric. It focuses on early childhood care, foundational literacy, flexible curricula, skill development, and digital literacy. The introduction of vocational education from the secondary level and the move toward multidisciplinary higher education is commendable. However, the real challenge lies in implementing these reforms across such a vast and diverse system without addressing issues like resource allocation, teacher training, and digital divide. The impact of NEP might remain limited. Problems with the Indian education system. Despite reforms, the Indian education system faces some persistent challenges. Lack of innovation. Students are often limited in their opportunities to explore creative or entrepreneurial fields. Limited aspirations, poor infrastructure, dependence on private tuition, limited job opportunities, and exploitative internships. So basically, this trend reflects the weakness in the formal education system. Lack of innovation and limited aspirations. One of the most significant challenges in the Indian education system is the lack of innovation. Students often face pressure to pursue conventional career paths like engineering or medicine, which limits their ability to think creatively or take risks in other fields such as the arts, entrepreneurship, or interdisciplinary studies. This is further exacerbated by an educational culture that prioritizes rote learning over problem solving or critical thinking. For India to stay globally competitive, nurturing a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship is crucial. Infrastructure issues in government schools. Infrastructure continues to be a significant roadblock, especially in rural government schools. Many schools lack basic necessities like proper classroom, clean drinking water, and functional toilets. Inadequate infrastructure not only disrupts the learning process but also leads to high dropout rates. For instance, a significant number of girls drop out due to the absence of separate sanitation facilities. If the goal is universal access to quality education, infrastructure development needs urgent attention. Dependence on private tuition and coaching. The increasing dependence on private tuition and coaching centers is a direct consequence of gaps in formal education system. Many students feel they cannot rely solely on their schools to prepare for critical exams or to provide quality education. This trend exacerbates inequality as only students from financially well-off families can afford these extra coaching classes. As a result, education becomes less about holistic development and more about exam preparation, which undermines the learning process. Women and child security in education. The education system must also ensure a safe and secure environment for all students, particularly women and children. Unfortunately, cases of harassment, abuse, and neglect are on the rise within educational institutions. While policies have been established to address these issues, such as the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences (POCSO) Act and guidelines against sexual harassment, poor implementation remains a major obstacle. A secure learning environment is essential not only for education success, but also for fostering an inclusive society. Why Indian students opt for higher education abroad? A growing number of Indian students are choosing to pursue higher education abroad, and this trend reflects some critical issues in the domestic education system. Many students believe that Indian institutions do not offer the same quality of education, opportunities for innovation, or job prospects as their foreign counterparts. Corruption, nepotism, and the lack of adequate research facilities further drive this migration. The challenge lies in improving the quality and scope of education at home so that students no longer feel the need to go abroad. To conclude, India's education dilemma is multifaceted, involving issues of access, quality, security, and global competitiveness. While the NEP 2020 offers a roadmap for reform, successful implementation is crucial. Addressing the problems for innovation, infrastructure, safety, and employability will not only strengthen the education system but also improve India's standing on the global stage. It is imperative to view education not just as a policy priority but as a critical component of national security and societal development. With this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you.
We'll talk about the NEP.
Yes, ma'am.
We will talk about the NEP, but here you need to add certain points like the NEP has given way for entrepreneurial activity. The management or science can also go for arts, and arts, social sciences can also opt for the science as a value-added course. So this value addition has given the students a broader perspective in all angles. So that also need to be addressed.
I've mentioned that in my paper. Because of time constraints, I couldn't mention in the
But
presentation.
because this is very important.
Yes,
You
yes.
need to understand you talk very good.
Exactly.
But NEP 2020, this application, yes, we
This was
are
good.
finding a little constraints on the implementation, but this has paved the way.
Exactly.
Like if you talk about a private organization, they have already implemented.
Yes, yes.
Government is yet to work on it because though they are coming up, it's because here comes the initiativeness. No, because we are not bound.
Right.
That's why you are getting that liberty of going on your own space. Otherwise, NEP has given the approach of multidisciplinary pursuit
Exactly.
and also interdisciplinary.
Yes.
That has given weightage, that has given addition to the students. And under the NEP, again, we also got ABC credit
Yes,
system.
we have.
That is again another plus point for the students. Especially for the students who are taking care of their family, earnings also.
They can store their
opt
credits.
for, they are earned 2 years, then they can have their credits and then come back and join after a year, after they look after the family.
It's not wasted.
Yeah, it's not wasted. Whereas earlier time, if you are leaving, then you have to start again
Again,
from scratch.
from scratch.
Right, so that's not the case here.
Yes,
So
yes.
this has got positive and negative impact. Yes, what you said is right. Implementation
Is the
is something that anybody and everybody has to do it with a passion.
right.
So that's where the problem is all about. So unless until you have a passion to do it, thank you. It's okay. So unless until you have a passion to, to get this implemented, it will not work.
I'll sure work on it as well.
Yeah, when you work on these data.
Right.
When you are seeing the metro cities, it is well accepted.
Right.
But if you go down
Rural.
deep at the rural area, there you have the problem of this implementation.
Right.
So you have to collect data on these lines also.
I'll try that.
Where are the hiccups or where are the challenges or what solution you can come up with.
Right.
So that part also should be. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else has to go? Any other presenter?
यहाँ पर send it through email.
What is your name here? What's your name?
Ankita.
Ankita.
Yes, sir. So, very good afternoon, Chair, Co-Chair and Resource Person ma'am and the people present over here. I am Ankita Pandey and I am, first of all, I'm very grateful to IIHSG to give me opportunity to present my paper on title Human and Drug Trafficking, a Borderless Threat to Non-Traditional Security of India. So first of all, I want to say, I will, in my presentation will include why human and drug trafficking both are very important aspect of Indian society, especially in the security basis, because these both are major threats which giving the security a new angle as a non-traditional security threat. So first of all, we need to know what is human trafficking and organized human trafficking trafficking and drug trafficking. Both are a criminal practice. If we talk about human trafficking, it is a criminal practice of exploitation of human being in the form of tools for fulfilling the profit-driven activities. On the other hand, if we talk about the drug trafficking, it is a global practice which involves distribution of drugs and other substances that are prohibited under the narcotics and related laws. Now, I want to say why I have taken this topic is because before I will highlight some of the major data which I have seen, US Department of State 2024 Trafficking in Person report says India is under Tier 2. It means it not fully meant a minimum standard of eliminating the trafficking, but making a significant effort toward that. Second report is UNODC's World Drug Report, which includes that the rising global drug use and emergence of potential new synthetics that leads to major cause of human, social and environmental problems. So these data are showing how these two threats are emerging in a speed that it is going to threaten not a security, not the broader security, but beyond that. That's why I have included non-traditional security. Non-traditional security is not limited to the military exercises. It is not about the state. It is about the individual to going to the state, because there is a many problem which is arising because of these threats. Firstly, health issues, development process, environmental process. These all are very relevant topics if we talk about the developmental aspect of the society, especially in India. So, there is one more thing which is very prevalent in the society is human and drug trafficking assets. These both are very entangled and multifaceted in nature. Drugs are often used as an instrument to manipulate and control the victims of trafficking by facilitating through the equipments for maintaining their exploitation and maximizing the profit of traffickers. Even if we talk about certain regions, then we can see that specific drugs are used to enforce the labor exploitation, such as use of hashish, used to keep the bricks layer in the state of bondage slaveries. Even in one study we can see that 67% of trafficking survivors sought healthcare services while they are being trafficked. So these are the very major concerns which are very interlinked and interrelated in both the aspects, human and drug trafficking, and it is creating the security to the next level. It's creating a threat to the security to the next level, not on the border issues, but also within the border, in the domestic level, national level, and these kind of security threats. Third one is it is not the last. There are many other recommendations and reforms is required, but as per the last, strengthening the community-based intervention is also important. See, the NGOs, the local organizations, only not the government is the major role here to prevent all these things. This is a collective initiative we need to give for combating these type of issues. So there are many in NGOs and forums who are working in that, like Freedom Farm, which mainly work on anti-sex trafficking NGO, and STPP, support for traffic pupil programs. So these kind of programs, which is run by the different NGOs and organizations and firm in the domestic and national level in India, which can also enhance the speed of combating these kind of issues. And at last, if I am talking about the conclusive part, then we can see the immense profit and high demand associated with the drug trade led many transnational crime organizations to focus exclusively on drug trafficking. See, drug and human trafficking are the second and third most threatening crimes in India and all over the world. The major is now growing intersection between the drug trade and human trafficking is primarily due to the drug organization expanding into the human smuggling and trafficking, rather than they are overall interdependent, interconnected, and doing their work for mutual profit. And we need to minimize the impact of both to destabilizing the world order and development process. So it is important to focus on strengthening the governance policies, international cooperation, and community-based intervention to enhancing the non-traditional security. Thank you.
Thank you, Deva. Your presentation was really good. I just want to understand, Ankita Pandey, I just want to understand, are you working in a specific area, because you are talking very generally, right? Are you working in a specific area at this point?
Yeah, actually,
Which area?
human trafficking is my major core area.
Human trafficking, like we have mentioned, human trafficking, a borderless threat on demand. So this is your topic. I'm asking you, this must be your thesis topic also, must be some relevant. So I just want to know whether you are working on a specific region or specific area on this.
Yes,
Which region you are working on?
there are two areas, Indo-Nepal border and India, and Delhi
Indo-Nepal
border
border.
and Delhi.
Are you doing comparative study on this?
No, it's not comparative. Actually, I'm just showing the trends and pattern, which is very different in the bordering states and also in metropolitan cities like Delhi. There's a difference and there's a range of practices. It's not the only one time which is practicing to fulfill these kind of threats or things, illegal activities. So I'm just showing the difference of patterns in these areas, not comparison.
No comparison. Are you also working on specific gender part also? Any age group you have defined on this?
No, not specifically gender or group age, but it is mainly focusing on the involvement part only and implementing part.
Since this topic is really vast and you have chosen a good one topic, but I would appreciate if you can also work on the age groups, because if you take the age groups that also work, that also differ, and also the gender and the minorities. If you can work on those lines, that will help you in your research, right?
Yes.
Those things also you need to work on, so that will actually be, because you have to use the term economic and social vulnerability, but you have not put anything on those lines, which should be a part of your research.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And one thing more.
Yeah.
What are you suggesting for this? How drugs can be controlled? How drugs being taken by the youth today can be controlled? What are your suggestions? Because you have studied this topic.
Firstly, sir, I'm in process of studying all these things, but what I think can be a good solution is that this is a problem cannot be solved by one player like government or something. It is a very collective and at the same time it is very perspective driven also. If we see about the practice of this kind of issue, then we come to know the various reasons behind why they are practicing. It's not only because of stress. It is not because of people involved in these kind of things, but there are many mindset also towards that. Like for example, in some areas, it is a part of their custom, or somewhere it is a part of their work. It is the tendency that it may enhance their work process. So they take. So we need to understand the strata, why they are taking and how it can be removed from the society, minimized from the society. We cannot say it is fully eradicable, but this can be combated and minimized to the extent. But it needs the collective process, and also it is a very long-term process to deal with it.
One thing more, that since drugs are related in our cultural aspects, right? So when say for instance we are worshipping or in a situation of devoting ourselves towards our spirituality, doing our spiritual work, so drugs are variously used. And it is also a fact that many youths are fallen to the drugs, not because of their own, but because of the system that the society operates. So when the religious condition tells the students, for instance, to go by this way, so how can it be stopped by the government? Are you getting it? कि दूसरा पियोगे तब जाके आप शिव जी को पूजा करोगे, भांग पियोगे then only you can worship the Lord Shiva. So how this can be stopped? Do you have you think anything about this? Do you think anything about this?
I will go on this, sir, but actually my major topic is on human trafficking. Drug, I have only studied for this presentation or my paper.
Culture is linked with this.
Yes, culture aspect is linked with. Yes, it is. But yes, sir, I will look after it and read more and more about it. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
My suggestion will be please keep the cultural aspects separately, especially when we are talking about the drugs. But the drugs part is you can the major media that you should go for is creating awareness. That is where we don't do that, creating awareness.
This is actually a very vast topic. Very vast topic. So I think whatever your research is, your paper is, like I think on this topic human and drug trafficking. So in human and drug trafficking, it is itself very vast. So you have to be specific for.
No, my view is not related.
Okay, you have, but आपको इससे specific होना पड़ेगा. अगर आप human and drug trafficking कर रहे हैं, तो both are different. Human and drug trafficking, they are just connected because human trafficking is different aspect है उसका perspective है और drug trafficking का different perspective है. So ये interconnected है, ऐसे और भी types interconnected है. But अगर research पे कर रहे हैं, तो you should be specific. कि सिर्फ आपके सेकेंडरी रिसर्च में वर्क करेगा, बट अगर आप प्राइमरी कर रहे हो तो प्राइमरी में यू शुड बी स्पेसिफिक. दिस इज व्हाट आई वांट टू से. आई थिंक आप सही बोल रहे हैं, लास्ट टॉपिक है तो ये चीज़.
Yes, ma'am. That's why my research area is not exactly the same. It is human trafficking, but not the drug trafficking. It's just a part. It's not the main research area. Yes. Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Good afternoon to chair and co-chair and resource person as well as audience. First of all, I would like to thanks to Dr. Nandina Vasista Madam to be part of this international conference. This is Manjunath J, research scholar and teaching assistant at Tumkur University, Karnataka. My research paper title is Exploring the Benefits of Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes in Karnataka about government programs. I wrote the abstract of this paper is Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes are among the most marginalized communities in India. Historically, they have faced discrimination and social exclusion, leading to economic and educational disadvantages. The government of Karnataka has implemented several programs and schemes to support the upliftment of SC/STs. These programs cover a wide range of areas, including education, employment, housing, and healthcare. This paper explores the benefits of these government programs for SC/STs in Karnataka. It draws on data from various sources, including government reports, academic studies, and interviews with SC/ST community members. The paper finds that government programs have positively impacted the lives of SC/STs in Karnataka. However, it also highlights some challenges in ensuring that all SC/STs benefits from these programs. The paper concludes by arguing that government programs play an important role in promoting the social and economic development of SC/STs in Karnataka. However, ensuring that these programs are implemented effectively and efficiently and reach all SC/ST communities is very important. The objectives of my paper are: first one, to know about SCP-TSP Act. Second one, explore the benefits of government programs for SC/STs in Karnataka. And third one is identify the challenges that remain in ensuring that all SC/STs benefit from these programs. And fourth one is suggest recommendations for improving the effectiveness of government programs for SC/STs in Karnataka. First of all, I focus on the background of this SC/ST Act 2013. For the development of scheduled tribes, the Indian government established the tribal subplans in the year 1975. For the purpose of developing scheduled tribes, a later specially component plan SCP was created. All state governments were required to distribute funds in accordance with the population of SC/STs, in accordance with the directives of the former National Planning Commission. The funding allocated under SCP-TSP was to be non-lapsable and non-divertible per the directive. It was not obligatory to provide a budget in line with the population of SC/STs, and there was no formal framework in place. To guarantee a budget in line with the population of SC/ST, the Karnataka government passed the scheduled caste sub-allocations and tribal sub-allocations planning, including planning allocations, utilizations of Financial Resources Act 2013 and rules in 2017. Actually, the act was created in 2013 and also made rules regarding that act in the year 2017. And the very important highlights of this act is: the objective of the act is to enable the allocation of the budget for SC/ST TSC directly in population to the population of SC/STs. In Karnataka state, we can see 24.10% of the people belongs to SC, and also remaining 6.95% of the people belongs to ST. And to make allocated funds non-divertible and focus on individual and community development programs, non-lapsable budget, a provision is made in section 13 of the SCP-TSP Act of Karnataka to carry over the upspent amount to the subsequent financial year after the audit, which means 100% utilization. Since there is a provision for disciplinary penal action as well as an incentive in section 24 of the SCP TSP Act of the Karnataka. Maximum efforts are made by all the departments to implement the schemes and utilize the funds completely in the same financial year. Especially as per section 7 of the Act, following norms are to be followed, which include the allocation for SCTSA scheme. And also we can see a systematic monitoring mechanism in Karnataka state to implement this SCP TSP Act. One is the State Council for Development. It is the first mechanism. It is usually aided by the Honorable Chief Minister and Member Minister SCST MP MLS. And the second one is a nodal agency that is aided by the Honorable Social Welfare Minister and Finance Department, Planning Department, and all other implementing department secretaries. And also third one monitoring mechanism is nodal department that is headed by the Principal Secretary, Social Welfare Department. Department will assist the nodal agency and development council and thus ensure the reach of benefits directives to SCST beneficiaries. And another monitoring mechanism is there, that is district level monitoring committee that is headed by Deputy Commissioner, members, MLA, MLC, and also implementing officers. And also last monitoring committee is Taluk level monitoring committee that is headed by the executive officer of Taluk Panchayat and member of ZP, I mean Jilla Panchayat, and also Taluk Panchayat members and implementing officers, I mean Department of Social Welfare, Karnataka. And also we can see budget allocation from 2008 to 9. I put data from 2008. Karnataka government release how much amount release for the welfare of the ACST from 2008 to 9, and also I covered up to 2019 to 20 data. And also I put there 2020 to 23 data are there, how much allocation allocated and also release amount and also expenditure amount. I put it in that chart, and also I analyzed through Excel. And also we can see a number of government schemes are there for development of ACST in Karnataka government. The government of Karnataka implementing a number of programs or schemes for empowering of the scheduled tribes, which are one is educational schemes, and another one is schemes of training, and also social empowerment schemes, infrastructure schemes, economic empowerment, and schemes implemented by corporation. Corporations in the sense there are different kinds of corporations are there. For example, Karnataka Valmiki Maharshi Corporation, Development Corporations, and also Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Development Corporations. Such corporations are working in Karnataka state. And if we look at the educational programs, there we can see a number of programs are there. Say for example, ashrama schools from class 1 to 5, and also pre-matric hostels class 9 to 10th, and also post-matric hostels from 11th to 12th. And also Karnataka government is maintaining a number of residential schools to make available the quality education children of SCST, particularly in rural areas. There are 8 to 4 residential schools. All the facilities are provided to the student free of cost. About 1.60 lakh students are in these schools. And pre and post matric scholarship also available for SCST students in Karnataka government. For example, for SLC students who are getting above 60% to 75%, usually they will get 7,000 rupees prize money. And also for SLC students above who are getting 75% of the marks, they will get 15,000. And for PUC students, they will get 20,000. And for degree students, they will get 25,000. And also for PG degree students, they will get 30,000. And for professional students, they will get 35,000. For first to fifth rank holders at PG level, they will get 50,000 rupees. And also, we can see another one educational program is implementing by Karnataka government, that is nothing but Prabuddha scheme. This is scholarship scheme purely. It is for who are studies abroad for PG and also UG. The students have to clear GRE, GMAT and also TOEFL, etc. exams before applying for scholarship. And the financial assistance covers admission fee and maintenance fee. It is about rupees 8 lakhs. And also different income slabs also there for students with income limit below 8 lakhs, full expenditure borne by the government only. And also for students with income between 8 lakhs to 15 lakhs, the government will assistance 50% of the amount. And for students with income between 15 lakhs to 25 lakhs, 33% assistance is given by the government only. And also financial assistance to the last student, for the last students who are doing or who are studying last subjects, they will get also government facilities. For example, stay fund rupees 10,000 per month for a 2 year to help the law graduate settle in the profession. And one-time assistance of rupees 50,000 to 1 lakhs for setting up office, and rupees 5,000 for buying books and for membership of bar council. And for who are low budget or low income, they will get also other facilities from the government. And for law graduates who have been chosen for tribunal training, 4 years training under professional lawyers to be provided. And also many number of trainings schemes also implementing in Karnataka state. For example, pre-examination training for competitive exams such as UPSC and also KPSC, coaching for exams in banking, and support for ZEE, NEET, NATA and also CLAT and also NDA exams, and help with GRE, GMAT and also SAT, TOEFL and IE, LATS preparations, and training in nursing and also paramedical fields. And also social empowering of SCST schemes also implementing in Karnataka state. Rewards for intercaste marriages, rupees 2.50 lakhs for men and rupees 3 lakhs for women with an income cap of 5 lakhs. And also rupees 2 lakhs in incentives for intercaste marriage up to 5 lakhs, and also compensation for widow marriage rupees 3 lakhs. No income restriction is there. And also simple marriage incentive 50,000 up to maximum income of rupees 5 lakhs. And promising rates for the marriage of Devadasi children. They will get 3 lakhs for a boy, and descended from Devadasi, rupees 5 lakhs for a girl descended from Devadasi. And also some economic development programs also implementing by Karnataka state government. For example, those who get loans from DCC Bank, nationalized and also KSFS banks are qualified for this program, and the loan amount as a minimum of 10 lakh and a maximum of rupees 10 crores. Sorry, the loan repayment period is 8 years. The beneficiary's interest payment is limited at 4%. Such kinds of economic benefits we can see in Karnataka government, and also some other schemes, especially corporations. What I told, corporations, those corporations also implementing a particular schemes. In Karnataka government, so we can see department-wise implementing programs, schemes, and also social welfare department is also there. That is also implementing schemes, and also corporations also there. Corporations also they are implementing specific schemes. Here, land purchase scheme. It is implemented by corporation, and also Ganga Kalyana scheme. There we can see Samagra Ganga Kalyana Yojana, individual borewell scheme, and also Samagra Ganga Kalyana open well scheme, and also Ganga Kalyana lift irrigation scheme. In under this Ganga Kalyana scheme, we can see three kinds of another sub schemes. If we look at land purchase scheme, under the scheme, scheduled tribe, not only scheduled tribe, scheduled caste also, tribe or caste, landless women, agricultural laborers are made land owners. The unit cost is fixed 15 lakhs for 26 districts and 20 lakhs for 6 districts, 50% loans, 50% subsidies there. And Ganga Kalyana, so under this scheme, irrigation facilities will be provided to the agricultural lands owned by the small and marginal scheduled tribes farmers. And also, Samagra Ganga Kalyana Yojana is also there. It is individual borewell. Small and marginal farmers belonging to scheduled tribes have 1.225 drilling a borewell on Kushki land and supply pump set, apply and electricity irrigation facilities are being provided. Under this scheme, the districts where
Can you wind up this?
yeah, thank you. So lastly, I conclude with the challenges in our Karnataka state belongs to SC people. They are facing some challenges when government is implementing these schemes. There we can see corruptions. It is one of the biggest challenge when during implementing the scheme, and because of less literacy, our illiterate people doesn't know or they don't have much awareness regarding the schemes. And also usually the schemes implemented by the Karnataka government are usually only for the people who have caste power, arm power, and also money power or political power. Those people only will be part of the schemes implemented by Karnataka government. And also my findings of this paper, maximum number of people doesn't know about the programs, and the government schemes plays a vital role. I should not ignore this point actually. The government schemes plays a vital role in empowering of scheduled caste and also scheduled tribes people. So I found these reasons from through interviews. In my last part of conclusion, the conclusion of my paper is the Karnataka government has introduced several program schemes for the welfare of scheduled caste and also tribes, including education, health, social and economic, etc. I appreciate all these programs. They are useful for the community development, no doubt at all. In this conclusion, I would like to bring some notice to the government. What I mentioned challenges in this article, government should solve all the problems with census, government should do the works, and 100% of the SAP DSP amount should spend for the welfare of the SC/ST people. Thank you for the opportunity.
Manjuna ji, I would like to point out certain things for you. See, you talk about all the benefits available in the government sector.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should have focused, the last one was no improvement here, you should have focused on what is the case study you have done. What is the ground real? Because I myself have visited Karnataka several times,
Yeah.
looking into these field work. Have you done the field work?
Yeah, I did some interviews.
Yeah, but here you talked about like from 2008 to 1920, you talked about the gaps of percentages that being benefited, but that's a huge gap of sanction and expenditure.
Yeah.
So have you worked on those?
Yeah, ma'am. Actually, I have shown their government how much.
Yeah, you had a gap of right from 79% to 83 to 49%. That was your gap.
Yeah.
But have you analyzed your research should have been more on this? Yeah, right?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
then you talk about the roads and the DCC and other 50% availability, subsidies and all. Have you done any case studies on these? What is your, see,
No.
the government, every state has got different schemes.
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
That the basic problem that we face is that people are not even aware of.
Yeah, definitely.
So have you done the ground field work?
Yeah, I did the interviews, ma'am. Who are beneficiaries of those schemes? I directly went to them, and also I talked to them.
So these are the ones that you need to present if at all you have done, because you are not promoting anything on
Yes.
those lines. You talk about all the other, that is there in the website, that's there. What is your field work? What is your finding? What is your case study? Have you done that?
Yes,
Because Karnataka, the Vedant history, myself have visited a number of times studying on all this. That is, the people are not even aware of these programs.
Yeah.
They are not even aware of. Leave alone Karnataka, you take any state, even in UP have an extensive study. They are not even aware of. They don't know that the scheme is existing.
Yes.
Even like a simple scheme like the widow pension scheme, even that was they are not aware of.
Yes.
So your case and your analysis should be more on how you can help the SC/ST that you have,
SC/ST, yeah.
SC/ST that you have focused on, how much benefits you can bring into them. Right?
Yeah.
Your work should
I
be
note the
more on
point.
it. That
Yeah.
is
Yes,
my
ma'am.
suggestion to
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah. I agree.
Please take it for
Yeah, please, yeah.
Just my suggestion.
Thank you, ma'am. I noted. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the opportunity.
And now I will request Dr. Chandra Bhanu Maharaj to speak on the topic of traditional and non-traditional security details. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nagalakshmi, Chairperson, and Dr. Renuka, Dr. Nandini Basist. It is indeed a great moment that such a conference on human security and global governance is being organized as the 4th annual Interdisciplinary Institute of Human Security and Governance. Such an attempt is definitely aimed at bringing great knowledge to the student and to all the attendees. My dear students, it is in fact a very serious issue before us that human security, why human security should be given priority even before the national security. see what happens that the national security was an issue and it was discussed and debated right from the beginning. Security, I'll say this way, that security has a history of its own. Right from the River Valley civilization, security was felt by the human beings. When the human settlement became indispensable for the human beings, then they thought of their security. Right from the human settlement to the city-state, the Indus Valley civilization, the Harappa and Mohenjo-daro civilization, city-states were there. Then people were living. Then the citadels were created to protect the citizens and the subjects. So people were seriously depending on citadel for their own protection. So for their protection, like their protection from the enemies, protection from outside enemies, protection for their own lives, for their own liberties, for their own properties, they needed various kinds of protection from the system of governance, whatever it could be. But right from this city-state, the next level of development was then happened there during the time of Republican state. And this Republican state happened there in India in the 3rd century BC. During this time, the Mauryan were rulers, and Mauryan Empire was, in fact, it was very serious about human security. So when many presenters here, they spoke on the fact that the idea of human security started in 1994, that is not a correct kind of seeing things. The human security, in fact, started in the 3rd century BC in India during the time of Emperor Ashoka. So it was he who, for the first time, stressed on human security. That the Mauryan rulers were liberal to that extent that the life, liberty, and property must be protected anyhow. And it was not seen as the security of the border state. That Mauryan border state security was not the security actually. The security of the people was security in fact. That was the difference between the Mauryan administrator and then the earlier administrator and even the today's administrator. So, right from the Mauryan time till 1945, the Second World War happened. After the Second World War, the idea of national security was felt like anything. It was because of the insecurity situation that was felt by many European nation states. That they thought that some kind of national security should be there so that we can protect ourselves. So it was because of this kind of a thinking that the United States of America developed the idea of national security. It was during the most important person like Hans Margendau was talking about the struggle for power. That he was talking about the struggle for power because of the fact that the nations are not going to survive if they are not careful about their own protection first, their own security first. So, meaning thereby that they should give priority to their national security first. This was what has been stressed by Hans Margendau. Later on, many other thinkers also, they accepted this, and right from 1945 till 1991-92, when the Soviet Union got disintegrated. So for this 45 years, national security remained there in the plank. And indispensably, and many nation states throughout the world, they follow national security as their primary and most important policy, foreign policy, the instrument. So national security could not be separated from any country's foreign policy. So any country, throughout the world, all the countries of the world, they may be small or they may be large, but they must have one national security policy. So this national security policy was, they felt that it is a must, because the world was living in the realist kind of a situation. Realist is what? Realism is what? That human being is the basic, the basic application and the basic assumption is that the human beings are basically selfish, that the human beings are basically egoists, that the human beings are basically nasty, that the human beings are basically solitary, that the human beings are basically insecure. So when these kind of conditions are there, it is very natural on the part of every human being, unlike in our human life, in our personal life. So when human beings are insecure, they'll have to be secure anyhow. So they'll have to do all kinds of things for their own security. Personal security is a must. You'll have to survive for doing anything and everything. If you are not surviving, you are nowhere. So survival became a very important challenge before the human being. So unlike survival was an important issue before a human being, before any human being throughout the world, it was also the case with the nation state. So nation state also thought that if we are not maintaining a standing army, then we will be nowhere. We will be attacked by other countries. So keeping standing army became a norm, became a vow, that everybody in international relations, that everybody, whatever it was, whether it was a small state, whether it was a big state, they had one standing army anyhow for their own protection. So traditionally, the idea and the logic behind keeping a standing army, paramilitary forces, active armed forces, was that if some other country is going to attack us, then we will respond to them in time. That was in the mind. So if the foreign country, any foreign country, why India maintains a very strong army? The reason behind this is that if there will be any external aggression, or whoever will dare to attack India will be responded accordingly. This is the main reason. So this logic run till today, yes, till recently. But in 21st century, that a kind of thought could not be maintained and could not be sustained. Why it is like this? Suddenly, with the development of science and technology and this mobile phone or wireless phone and many more things, internet, that yes, the world shrink a lot. That the relationship between human being became very close. Then they felt very, close to each other. So that way, what happened, that the difference and the doubt that were there in the mind of them, that could be abated, that could be vanished into thin air. So that was the reason why we started believing everyone as if they are our friends, because of the development of science and technology, and especially in the field of communication and information, that the world has become a small place to live in. Now anything can be sent from here to somewhere else, and we can receive anything from somewhere, from foreign country to this place anytime and in any situation. So nothing problem is there. So science has developed to that extent that we are feeling that we belong to a particular planet. Now we are talking about planet. Earth is our planet. That children are being taught to that we are living in only one planet. Okay, so we will have to protect this planet anyhow. Why this is like this? Because the thinking of the human being, it has been very close, that the human beings are one thing, one element. That a kind of thing was never there beforehand. After the dismantling and disorganization of Soviet Union in 1991, then the America the other bloc left alone. It was only one power. So someone has described it very beautifully that from the superpower status to America has become a hyperpower now. Right. After Soviet Union is gone case now. So when Soviet Union was finished over, then America was left with only power. So there is no other power to challenge America. So now America is at the top. The eagle is sitting on the top. Yes. And there is nobody to challenge them. So in such a situation, the organization of the whole world took place, and the world, in this organization, instead of giving importance to the border security or border patrolling of a state, then the people suddenly started when you are talking about a country, say for instance in India, when you are talking about India, you are definitely not talking about the border of India. You are talking about the people living in India. Nation state doesn't speak anything. It is definitely not about the forest of India. Definitely not about rivers of India. Definitely not about the birds and bees of India. Definitely not about animals of India. National security or the security is such a case, and when somebody is saying about the nation and its security, he is talking about the security of the human being alone. So it is human security and not the national security. Human security is more important, more essential and more needed even than the national security. Such a fact could be realized by the human being, not only by the Indian people but throughout the world. All the United Nations organized in this 1994, this report, development report also suggests that right from this time, but even before this, in 1990, Professor Makbul Haq, he was the person who started, he was from Bangladesh. So he for the first time started that, he started looking at the things of security from this angle for the first time. So Professor Huck's angle was that instead of giving so much time and so much energy and so much everything on making our border secure, we should pay attention to our own people. This thing is very important because ultimately security talks about the human beings. So Indian population, that makes sense. We are 140% people in India, million people in India, with an annual expenditure of $37 billion on military, on defense system. India spent $37 billion per year. And a country like China spends around $114 billion on defense, protection of the country. And the United States of India spend around $700 billion on defense. So this $700 billion could have been used for education, could have been used for eradication of malarial fever, could have been used for eradication of malnutrition, could have been used for eradication of TB or leprosy or so many diseases, and the corona kind of a thing can be tackled very easily, could have been tackled easily if this money would have been diverted from defense expenditure towards the actual human being. So may it be the $700 billion of the United States of America or $114 billion of China or $37 billion of a country like India, where it is a poor country, but we are spending $37 billion on our this border security problem, on border security and border patrolling. That is something rethinkable. We should think once again about how correctly we are doing this kind of a thing. that kind of a logic, that kind of a thinking actually made the people, not only of India, but of the whole world, to think twice, once again, about their military expenditure. The money that we are spending on defense, on the military apparatus, on the border patrolling and border security, that this money can be diverted towards our own developmental activities. That school and colleges can be established, that the hospital can be made, that the children, poor children can be given different kinds of health and assistance, that women security can be tackled. There are many more issues and problems can be solved by this money. So from the traditional way of looking at security to non-traditional way of looking at security is what is known as human security today. Human security is a product of the 21st century. Generally, we think that way, that it was 1994 that the Professor Haq from Bangladesh, he started thinking in this line, and after that he was a rapporteur, he was of a United Nations organization, and it was because of this, the strongness and the strength of his argument was such that even the United Nations organization was bound to say yes to this. Professor Haq is no more. He is a professor of development. He has written many books. He is an outstanding scholar. And then the most important part is that United Nations organization accepted this argument given by Professor Haq, and then after that human security became a most important topic before every nation state. Today, in a technical system of governance, that we are talking about human security more than that of the security of the land, security of the country. So now traditional security, to what you would say traditional security, like attack of one country on the other country, this phase is almost over. But not exactly this can be said like this, that the traditional security system or the Marjandaw style of looking at security is no more there. We cannot say at present. Why? Because Russia has attacked Ukraine, and the war is still going on, and the traditional security still matters. But by and large, but then there is only one Russia. There is only one Ukraine, isn't it? So they are fighting with one another with this traditional way of weaponization. But then it will not be correct enough to say that traditional way of describing security is still there. Traditional way of describing security actually subsists in the national security. But the non-traditional security system subsists in the human security. So instead of spending too much on protecting our border, instead of spending too much on our defense system, we should pay attention to the other important and real threats. Threats are of two types. Fine? One is unreal threat, the unreal threat, and the other is real threat. So unreal threat or perceived threat, yes, perceived threat. Perceived threat is dealing with military. That the other country is going to attack us tomorrow. So why we will have to maintain military definitely. Border security force is a must. Why? The other countries are ready to mingle us with dust. They are ready to kill us. So this kind of a feeling and thinking, in fact, make us to go by the standing army, by the paramilitary forces, by the active military. But when it is not there, then this kind of a thinking will not be there. It is a perceived threat, perception that tomorrow he is going to do this kind of behavior with me. He may attack me. He may do some harm with me. This kind of a feeling, in fact, ask us to or make us to think about making ourselves strong. If the other person is going to attack us, then what shall I do? What will be my response? है ना? This is what called traditional way of looking at security. But right now this kind of thing is gone case. It is no more there in the discussion, no more there in the debate. Now wars are not taking place between two nation states. Even the drug trafficking that one speaker, Ms. Pandey was speaking here, that drugs can also be channelized from one country to another country to destroy their youth. Khatam, over matter. So not necessarily that you have to, or the foreign country will attack another country. Drugs can be used, the human trafficking is there, then they can be made poor, they can be made, made to suffer like anything. Their education can be disturbed, can be destroyed, their culture can be destroyed, their people, their constitution can be destroyed, their institution can be destroyed. So various means and mechanisms are there, and these are also part of security. We'll have to provide security. In fact, human security doesn't mean reducing the national security. It is actually to blending the national security with the human security. So that way you will have to see. So, yeah, fine. I think I'll have to stop here. Thank you very much for listening to me.
This is a huge topic.
Yes. But I hope I have spoken about things that was needed from me. Thank you people very much. Thank you, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now I will request Dr. Renuka to give her remarks.
Good afternoon. I'm Renuka and I'm honored to be here as a resource person today. So I extend my heartfelt thanks to IHSG, Dr. Nandini Basista for giving me this opportunity to share my views and perspective. And basically, जो चंद्रभानु सर ने जिस तरीके से चीज़ें बताई हैं about the traditional security and the non-traditional security. First of all, traditional security जो है वो आपका state related है, ठीक है? लेकिन जो नॉन ट्रेडिशनल है, हम लोगों को फोकस नॉन ट्रेडिशनल सिक्योरिटीज़ पे प्राइमरीली ज़्यादा करना चाहिए, क्योंकि ऑलरेडी आवर गवर्नमेंट इज स्पेंडिंग मेजॉरिटी ऑफ थिंग्स ऑन ट्रेडिशनल सिक्योरिटी. तो हम ट्रेडिशनली सिक्योरिटी की बात करें तो हम सिक्योर हैं, बट फॉर द नॉन सिक्योरिटीज़ जिसके अंदर एक टॉपिक आता है जो शायद हम लोगों के लिए आज के लिए बहुत कंसर्न है, विच सेज राइट टू प्रिवेसी एंड सर्विलेंस इन इंडिया. सो बेसिकली क्या है कि अगर हम प्रिवेसी की बात करते हैं, राइट टू प्रिवेसी, हमारा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल फ्रेमवर्क जो है वो ये कहता है कि आर्टिकल 21 सेज राइट टू प्रिवेसी गारंटी द राइट टू लाइफ एंड पर्सनल लिबर्टी, which has been interrupted by the Supreme Court to encompass the right to privacy, establishing a critical legal foundation for individual freedom against state surveillance. Supreme Court की ये जो key rule insights हैं, ये दिया था जस्टिस K.S. पुत्तुस्वामी वर्सेस यूनियन ऑफ इंडिया इन 2017 में, जो ये emphasize करता है कि any human being must meet the test of legality, necessity and proportionality to safeguard individual freedom against arbitrary surveillance practices. इसके जो रोल है, जो प्रिवेसी एज फ्रीडम्स फाउंडेशन कहता है, दैट सेज कि इट इज एसेंशियल फॉर द एक्सरसाइज ऑफ पर्सनल लिबर्टी एज इट सेफगार्ड्स इंडिविजुअल फ्रॉम अनवारंटेड स्टेट इंट्रूजन्स, thereby enabling them to express themselves freely and make autonomous choices and maintain their dignity in a democratic society. सेकेंडली एक सेक्शन और आता है सर्विलेंस। इस अभी जो मैंने आपको कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल फ्रेमवर्क एक राइट टू प्रिवेसी का बताया है, एक्ट आर्टिकल 21, इसमें एक सर्विलेंस वर्ड जो बार बार आ रहा है, ये भी हमारी सिक्योरिटी ब्रीच करता है। अगर हम इसमें डीपली रिसर्च करें तो सर्विलेंस पॉलिसी और कुछ जस्टिफिकेशन है, शायद से बहुत लोगों को पता भी है, बहुत लोगों को नहीं भी पता है, क्योंकि हम लोग इन चीज़ों पे ध्यान नहीं देते। आजकल हमारे साथ बहुत सारे स्मार्ट फ्रॉड्स होते हैं जिस तरीके से डेली लाइफ में, बट हम हार्डली इन चीज़ों को कंसीडर करते हैं। वी यूज टू गेट मेल्स फ्रॉम द बैंक साइट्स एंड फ्रॉम एवरीवेयर कि येस आप लोग इस चीज़ से किसी को पिन मत शेयर कीजिए। हम लोगों को कैसे पता चलेगा कि हम लोगों के पास में कोई भी तरीके का कोई मैसेज आ रहा है? वी यूज टू जस्ट वन क्लिक। इवन वी इस एज में भी आके हम लोगों इतना अगर हम पढ़े हुए हैं, फिर भी हम लोग रिसर्च साइट से हम लोग नहीं जस्टिफाई कर पाते कि विच थिंग इज राइट एंड विच थिंग इज रॉन्ग। सो अनइंटेंशनली वी यूज टू क्लिक ऑल द थिंग्स एंड हमारे अकाउंट से फंड चला जाता है, या हम लोगों का डेटा जो है वो ऑटोमेटिकली गवर्नमेंट कहीं ना कहीं पे जो हमारा आज पूरा सिस्टम है वो ऑनलाइन हो चुका है, तो उस केस में सारा डेटा हम लोगों का सबके पास चला जाता है। इफ़ वी गो टू चेक इन अ होटल वी जस्ट हैव टू गिव आधार कार्ड। लोग क्या करते हैं, उसको ऑनलाइन दे देते हैं। आजकल ये सिस्टम बना दिया है कि ऑनलाइन देते हैं तो उनके पास ऑनलाइन चला गया, दे कैन गेट योर कॉपी एंड दे कैन मिस यूज दिस। बट इट इज़ बेटर कि हम लोगों को कुछ चीज़ों का ध्यान रखना होता है कि नहीं हम जा रहे हैं, सो वी शुड राइट की फॉर द बैंक यूज़ ओनली, फॉर होटल यूज़ ओनली, तो हम इन चीज़ों को बचा सकते हैं, बट हम नहीं करते। तो अगर मैं सर्विलेंस की बात करूं तो लीगल बेसिस जो कहते हैं, सर्विलेंस इन इंडिया इज प्राइमरीली डिराइव्ड फ्रॉम लॉज सच एज इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी एक्ट एंड द इंडियन टेलीग्राफ एक्ट, which govern the interceptions of communication and data privacy from lacking robust safeguard for individual rights। जो इसका इम्पैक्ट पड़ता है हम लोगों के ऊपर सोसाइटी पे, द इम्प्लीमेंटेशन ऑफ सर्विलेंस मैकेनिज्म हैज सिग्निफिकेंट इम्प्लीकेशंस ऑफ सिविल लिबर्टीज, पोटेंशियली लीडिंग टू सेल्फ सेंसरशिप अमंग सिटीजन्स, erosion of trust in government institutions and challenging in balancing security need with the right to privacy। इसकी जस्टिफिकेशन की अगर हम सिक्योरिटी और प्रिवेसी की बात करते हैं तो सिक्योरिटी एनहांसमेंट आर्ग्यूमेंट, proponents of surveillance argue that it essential for national security, enabling authorities to prevent terrorism, crime and other threats। जो हमारा ट्रेडिशनल सिक्योरिटी में आता है एज पर मेंशन, जो अभी चंद्रभानु सर ने भी बताया कि हमारा गवर्नमेंट ऑलरेडी उस पर बहुत सारा खर्चा करता है। सो दिस पर्सपेक्टिव एम्फेसाइज द नीड फॉर प्रोएक्टिव मेजर्स टू प्रोटेक्ट सिटीजन फ्रॉम ऑफन प्रायोरिटाइजिंग कलेक्टिव सेफ्टी ऑफ इंडिविजुअल प्रिवेसी राइट। जब हम ट्रेडिशनल सिक्योरिटी में ऑलरेडी इतना फंड दे रहे हैं, हम लोग उसमें इतना इंडिया अच्छे से दे रहा है डिफेंस सेक्टर को, लेकिन हम वहाँ पे ये छोटी चीज़ें लैक कर रहे हैं कि आज के टाइम में हम सब लोग बिल्कुल कंप्यूटराइज्ड और स्मार्ट हो चुके हैं कि सबसे पहले प्राइमरीली वर्क करने की नीड तो वहीं पे है। अगर हम वहीं वर्क नहीं करेंगे, जो हमारा डेटा ब्रीच हो रहा है, तो किस तरीके से हम जो नेशनल सिक्योरिटी है, ट्रेडिशनल सिक्योरिटी जिसे हम, क्योंकि टॉपिक हमारा ह्यूमन सिक्योरिटी रिलेटेड है, तो जो ट्रेडिशनल सिक्योरिटी हमारी हर्ट हो रही है डे टू डे लाइफ में, वो हमारी कहीं ना कहीं जो प्राइमरी हमारा सिक्योरिटी है वो सिस्टम खराब है, जो कि डेटा सर्विलेंस के अंडर में आता है। तो प्रिवेसी कंसर्न और लिमिटेशंस की अगर मैं बात करूँ इस सेक्टर में, तो क्रिटिक्स हाईलाइट दैट एक्सटेंसिव सर्विलेंस कैन इन्फ्रिंज ऑन पर्सनल फ्रीडम एंड सिविल लिबर्टीज, लीडिंग टू अ कल्चर ऑफ मिसट्रस्ट। They argue that without stringent regulation, surveillance parties may become invasive, undermining the very security they aim to protect, the eroding public confidence in governmental oversight। तो अगर आप इनकी बात करें गवर्नमेंट सेक्टर की, तो बहुत सारे केस स्टडीज़ भी थे जो आजकल हम लोग रिसर्च भी जिन पे करते हैं, लाइक जैसे आधार का प्रोजेक्ट था। तो आधार प्रोजेक्ट सेज अ लार्ज स्केल बायोमेट्रिक सर्विलेंस initiative in India raising concern about data privacy, consent and potential misuse of personal information by the state agencies. Second, अगर हम एक और CCTV cases की बात करें जो urban areas में आ रहा है, that deployment of CCTV कैमरा जो हमारी दिल्ली गवर्नमेंट ने भी डिप्लॉय किया है हर सोसाइटी के अंदर, कैमरा इज मेजर क्रिटिक एम टू एनहांस पब्लिक सेफ्टी. Whatever I am saying today about right to safety and this surveillance के ऊपर मैं ये अपने पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस पे भी बात कर रही हूँ, just because where I am living in a society वो पूरा कैमरा ऑक्यूपाइड है. समटाइम मुझे क्या है कि जिसकी मुझे नहीं पता इसका एक्सेस कहाँ है. सबसे पहला मेरा जो डर आता है कि वो एक्सेस किसके पास है, मुझे नहीं पता. मैं घर में क्या चीज़ ला रही हूँ, क्या चीज़ मेरे कार से आ रही है या स्कूटी से मेरे हाथ में आ रही है, वो राइट, लेफ्ट, फ्रंट, बैक सारे कैमराज में कैप्चर हो रही है. सो मुझे इस बात का डर है कि मैं कुछ ऐसा सामान ला रही हूँ, मुझे क्या पता किसके पास एक्सेस है और वो उस चीज़ को देखेंगे, क्या उसको एनालाइज करेंगे, तो वो मेरी सेफ्टी भी इससे पर्सनली हर्ट होती है. तो बेसिकली इसलिए जो सीसीटीवी का जो मैटर है ये भी हम लोगों के लिए एक थ्रेट ही है, लेकिन हम लोगों को इस पे वर्कआउट करने की ज़रूरत है ताकि हमारी पर्सनल प्राइवेसी ना ब्रीच हो. ऐसे ही इंटरनेट मॉनिटरिंग की अगर बात करें तो गवर्नमेंट सर्वेलेंस ऑफ इंटरनेट एक्टिविटीज़ अंडर वेरियस लॉज इलिस्ट्रेट द टेंशन बिटवीन national security interest and individual privacy interest, highlighting the need for transparent policies and accountability mechanism. तो ये जो तीनों केस स्टडीज बताए हैं मैंने, ये रिसेंट कुछ ईयर्स के ही हैं. तो अगर हम इनकी बात करें तो ये इनका जो इम्पैक्ट हमारे पे सिविल लिबर्टीज पे जो पड़ता है, दैट्स ए चिलिंग इफेक्ट ऑन फ्रीडम. कि परवेसिव नेचर ऑफ अ सर्वेलेंस कैन इंस्टिल फियर अमंग इंडिविजुअल रिजल्टिंग इन अ चिलिंग इफेक्ट on civil liberties, where people may avoid engaging in public discourse or activism due to concern over being watched or tracked. तो ये जो सर्विलेंस की अगर मैं बात करूँ तो ये हमारे ह्यूमन सिक्योरिटी के कॉन्फ्रेंस पे भी है. अगर हम बात करें कि बिकॉज दिस इज़ द टॉपिक कि अगर हम किसी गवर्नमेंट एम्प्लॉय को बोलें कि आप आए कॉन्फ्रेंस में बात करें, दिस इज़ अबाउट माय पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस, तो हर कोई ये सोचता है ह्यूमन सिक्योरिटी है और ऊपर से गवर्नमेंट हमारी जो है बीजेपी है, तो आई थिंक हर कोई एक बार डरता है बात करने में इन टॉपिक्स पे. बट जब तक हम इन चीज़ों को नहीं रिसर्च करेंगे, नहीं वर्कआउट करेंगे, हमारी प्राइवेसी इसी तरीके से हर्ट होती रहेगी और हम कुछ भी नहीं कर पाएंगे बिकॉज गवर्नमेंट इज टेकिंग एक्शंस. और जहाँ तक गवर्नमेंट के बहुत सारे इनिशिएटिव्स हैं उसमें मतलब मैं ये नहीं कहूँगी, आई एम नॉट सेइंग एनी पॉजिटिव और नेगेटिव, बट गवर्नमेंट के बहुत सारे जो डिसीजंस हैं दे आर वेरी गुड, इन हमारे इंटरेस्ट में है. बट कहीं ना कहीं अगर अपनी पर्सनल बात करूँ तो वो मेरे को थ्रेट लगता है. सीसीटीवी है या हमारे पास जो मैसेजेस आते हैं, हम एटीएम्स में जाते हैं, वहाँ पे हमारे थम्स का स्कैनिंग हो जाता है, तो दीज ऑल आर थ्रेट्स. तो हमारा राइट टू प्राइवेसी बेसिकली ब्रीच हो रहा है. अब बैलेंसिंग सर्विलेंस एंड प्राइवेसी राइट की अगर मैं बात करूं तो हमारे लेजिस्लेटिव फ्रेमवर्क नेसेसिटीज हैं कुछ. अ कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव प्राइवेसी लेजिस्लेशन इज एसेंशियल टू एस्टेब्लिश क्लियर गाइडलाइन एंड प्रोटेक्शन फॉर इंडिविजुअल अगेंस्ट इन्वेसिव सर्विलेंस प्रैक्टिसेस, ensuring that personal data is handled with respect and accountability while balancing national security interests with fundamental rights. So now my last thing to conclude that recommendation for policy maker, अगर मैं surveillance और security की बात करूँ तो establish clear legal framework, जिसकी हम लोगों को बहुत requirement है कि policy maker should prioritize the creation of comprehensive legal framework that define the scope and limitations of surveillance practices, ensuring that any state surveillance is conducted transparently with adequate checks and balance to protect individual privacy right and civil liberties. And second and last is enhance public accountability mechanism, implementing independent oversight bodies to monitor surveillance activities is essential for fostering public trust. These mechanisms should allow citizens to report abuse and seek readdress, ensuring that security measures do not compromise fundamental rights or lead to arbitrary state actions. Thank you for listening. Thank you both of you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, you can.
So, thank you you, Renuka ma'am. Another perspective to right to privacy. We know that right to privacy is now being considered as fundamental rights, Article 21 at time. You mentioned about the CCTV issue and a lot of focus on CCTV and other data privacy that we see today. And इसमें we see the biggest victim is the women. Okay. So I want your insights, something related to ये जो आज हम देख रहे हैं women security getting impacted by your right to privacy और CCTV, उस पे आपका क्या कहना है? Do we have anything or how can we move ahead with that? Because whatever problems we see in women security, ये सारा CCTV and ये सब है, तो इसके दो पहलू हैं. तो इस पर्सपेक्टिव पे आप एक चीज बोलें.
हेलो, जैसे आप बता रहे हैं सीसीटीवी, इसके भी दो पर्सपेक्टिव इसलिए हैं कि एक तो पॉजिटिव है कि हम लोगों का सिक्योरिटी हो रहा है. हम लोग कहीं भी जाके तो हम एक तरीके से अगर सपोज माई फादर इज लुकिंग या माई हस्बैंड अगर कैमरे पे देख रहे हैं, मैं कहीं बाहर जा रही हूँ तो पता चलेगा, या आप जा रहे पता चलेगा यहाँ तक आप लास्ट गए. देन उसके बाद कुछ मेजरमेंट पे नेक्स्ट कैमरा उसे कंप्यूट करेगा कि हाँ ठीक है ये यहाँ पे गए. ये अगर हम इस पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से देखें तो हमारे लिए भी अच्छा है. लेकिन अगर हम सेकेंडली ये बात करें कि मुझे जो थ्रेट मैंने जिसका इशू किया वो मेरा पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस कहता है कि मेरा सोसाइटी जो है वहाँ पे राइट लेफ्ट एवरी वेयर इट्स अ कैमरा. ठीक है, अब क्या होता है कई बार हम ऐसी चीज़ें ला रहे हैं, हमें नहीं पता उसका एक्सेस किसके पास है. और ये ज़रूरी नहीं है कि वो कैमरा गवर्नमेंट ने डिप्लॉय किया है. हमारे यहाँ पूरे सोसाइटी में खुद भी लोग हर घर में पार्टीज में कैमरा रखते हैं. तो अब वो लोग क्या होता है, सपोज मैं 1 kg रियल लाइफ एग्जाम्पल, मैं 1 kg टमाटर ला रही हूँ या इफ आई एम कैरिंग समथिंग जो कैमरे में नहीं आना चाहिए, लेकिन वो चीज़ आ रही है या किसी को पता चल रहा है, वो मुझे नहीं बोल रहे बट मेरा प्रीवियसली तो हर्ट हो रहा है ना. व्हाट आई विल फील कि नहीं, मुझे दिमाग में आएगा एक थ्रेट रहेगा कि अगर मुझे अभी गाड़ी से निकलना है तो पहले मुझे इसको दूसरे बैग में डालना पड़ेगा सो दैट मेरा सोसाइटी उसे ना देखे मैं अगर कुछ लेके आ रही हूँ. तो कहने का मतलब इट इज़ अ रियल लाइफ माइनर एग्जाम्पल जो हम लोग मिस कर देते हैं. भले ही हमारी सिक्योरिटी के लिए अच्छा है चीज़, लेकिन ये चीज़ मेरी पर्सनल सिक्योरिटी को हर्ट कर रहा है. यहाँ सबकी बात कर रहे हैं, दिस इज गुड, बट पर्सनली अगर मैं बात करूँ तो कहीं ना कहीं पॉलिसी मेकर को इसका भी मतलब ध्यान रखना चाहिए, तभी पॉलिसी कोई बनानी चाहिए.
थैंक यू सर.
Right, I'll complete this answer one thing, which is this. Actually, the thing is that you must be knowing Benjamin Franklin.
Definitely sir.
Okay. Benjamin Franklin was an outstanding politician of the United States of America. Okay. He once said that for getting a huge amount of security, liberty cannot be surrendered.
Right.
Liberty is much more than what you call security. So when someone has fixed a camera, CCTV camera, it is one thing, I will not say much about the camera. Say for one machine is there it is put there in the United States of America. It is called gazetted machine. There is a term for it. It is a security machine. So the idea is that you have to pass through this machine so that only you can board the aeroplane. So when you are passing through this gate, this machine will take your entire anatomy.
Yes.
Right, entirely. So including many things. So it became a serious question here in the United States of America that what is this bullshit thing? When we are going, this is our own country, we are living in our country, and why this machine is doing a surveillance on us? And when we are going, we are no country, we are no criminals, we are no bad guys. So what is the point of giving so much attachment and the machines are being used for our own researching? So this machine will take your every photograph inside photograph.
Yes.
Okay, your body weight, blood, eye size, and so many things. So a serious objection was put there in the US Congress. that such a mission is definitely a violation of the civil rights and liberty, personal liberty. So immediately then the United States of America government, US government, they stop it. So you were talking about the CCTV camera. The CCTV camera has no right to make surveillance on us. We have our own liberty. And you'll be surprised to know this, that in the Constitution of India, it is not the security which has been given importance, rather the liberty is. The fundamental rights and the directive principle of state policy, they talk more about the liberty, human freedom. Freedom are more important. So freedom must not be compromised for buying a slight security.
सर बस एक लाइन है ना
Yes. So justice है, freedom and liberty पे focus किया है, they are never insecure.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying कि वो security जो हमारी personal है, वो breach हो.
Okay, so I think this debate will continue and go on.
One comment to sir's presentation. Sir, I attended your presentation very minutely, but the problem in reality, the structural constraint of international politics determines the role of the state. No individual state is not in a position to formulate and implement, practice his own foreign policy. More specifically, I should mention of non-investing in the border security, while other states are investing on border security. That's why this is a very
This is a dilemma, it's a problem.
what you said is it is from my own sense of justice.
Yes,
This is justified.
You are right.
Yeah, so
But
that is what I will
listen
do
to-
is, I will conclude the entire thing into 4 aspects, right? So this debate between the traditional and non-traditional security, it will continue to remain debate. But there are 4 things that we can address over here. First is relevance and applicability. Here, the critics of the traditional security, they talk about the state-centric military giving more importance. Then we talk about resource allocation. The second point, it talks about it focuses on balanced approach. Balanced approach includes right from social welfare to public health to environment sustainability and so on. Then the third important point where this debate goes on is the policy implementation. Here the policy implementation it basically focuses on the cooperative of international framework. So this is where it is not only the national but also the international framework. Then the last but not the least, the 4th point, that's the role of non-state actors. They play a major role in shaping the global dynamics. Right from you talk about the terrorist group or you talk about the multi-distinct approach, or you talk about the grassroots level. The non-state actors play a major role in shaping this. So the debate surrounding this traditional and non-traditional security is no more, we cannot say that it's an academic, they have real world implications. So for how we understand and respond to threats is what is our concern. Like Mohammad Abdul or Ms. Ankita and Ms. Manjuna, even Ms. Renuka ma'am and our co-chair Dr. Chandrababu, right? We all talk about so much on these security aspects in different levels, different perspectives we brought about these things, right? So what I want to tell you is as our world becomes increasingly interconnected and it's more complex on nowadays, it is essential to adopt more holistic view. Holistic view here we cannot holistic view of security. One that recognizes the importance of both military readiness. Military readiness is as equally important as we are talking about the threats also. So that is why it is equally important. Then necessity of addressing the broader societal challenges. This broader societal challenges includes what you guys talked about, the human trafficking and trafficking. That also includes that, right? You cannot ignore it. So what I will say is by embracing this comprehensive security framework, we can better prepare for uncertainties of future and work towards more stable, equitable and secure world for all. So that is how I would like, because this debate is something that will go on. Even if you keep it for another 2 days, the interested people, they will have a debate and they will give their own perspective. It's true. But we cannot look into one perspective. We have to look into both sides of the coin. That is how it works. So that is how I feel that we all have to work. As I said, we have to work on the secure world for all. The crux is the major point. You talk about Ukraine, you talk about Russia. So what is the fight is all for? Security for all.
Yes.
That's it. Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
I just hope you guys
Well, as they say that all's well that ends well, and thank you so much for such an enlightening and engaging session on traditional and non-traditional security threats. And just this reminded me of a study, that a paper that I read, that all these tools that now we have, especially in 21st century after artificial intelligence and cameras and all these things, these are specifically for your security. But after all these, the crime rates have increased. That's the irony when we see the percentage. So actually the real reason why they were put up, I don't think that they have helped it out. So of course, as you said, ma'am, that the ultimate balance and how ma'am has also put it across. So thank you so much for the engaging session. I would now like to invite Dr. Nandini Bashisht to kindly felicitate our chair, Professor Dr. Naga Lakshmi ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Now I would like to invite Dr. Chandrabhanu Bhara sir.
Just 1 minute.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And a resource person, Renuka Shyam Narayan ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So this is the end of today's 4th annual International IHSC conference, and it ended with a very good discussion. Every time Nagalakshmi ma'am came, and we have a very good discussion. Last time also we had, and this year also. And this session is actually the crux of the whole 2 days conference, because in this session we are having a debate between traditional and non-traditional security. We established this institute only because awareness generation about the human security, because when we say about security, people always think about border security or national security or physical security. after 1960s we have in mind about environmental security, and then from 2000 onwards we have SDGs and all, but then also people are not so much aware about the holistic concept of human security. So in this session we tried to have a debate on traditional and non-traditional security, and a very good question came up with the last two presentations of our resource person about the state role and privacy, and how much state can do or encroach or enter in personal life to secure, because security also can be problematic for securing privacy. And also about the thing that the debate between what is more important, liberty or security. And really we are overwhelmed by the responses, and today's discussion we have around 350 papers, and we selected out of that 50 best papers for journal, and we published 6 books out of it. And I think by these papers we can think about it and discuss about it, the localized issues in an indigenous manner and in a holistic dimension. And we are thankful to all the chairperson, and especially who are present now, the chairperson of this session, Professor Nagalakshmi, who is always very much benevolent to us and come in spite of having very busy schedule. And also we are grateful to our co-chair, Professor Chandrabhanu Bharas, who came all the way from Noida to join us. Also he is having a very busy schedule. He just concluded his class and came here. Same is applicable for Nagalakshmi ma'am. So we are really thankful to both of you. And what I can say about Renuka, she is like my little sister, and I always have kind of Tom and Jerry relation. And she is one of the core member of IHSC team, and without her help we can't organize this great event. And in the last session she also proved that how much she is having capability as a researcher, because her paper is really good and her discussion and her presentation is really good. So thank you Renuka for enriching us with your thought. And thank you the audience, especially Manjunath, who came as a paper presenter but became a member of organizing team, all the way came from Tumkur. And Gayatri, who came from Kerala, thank you. Actually she is also helping us for last 2 years. Last year she was having fever, so joined virtually, but this year she is present. Thank you Odamo and Aladdin for coming here and enriching us about the world perspective. And thank you Amit for coming from Himachal Pradesh for only this seminar and helping us in organizing this event. What I can say about my husband, secretary of this institute, Niladri Bhaumik, you are the, what I can say, like the best part of the whole event, because without you I can't manage the whole event. So thanks a lot for being with us, be with me and be with IHSC. So here I am concluding this mega event. Hope to meet you all again. Thank you.